It's that time again. We're going to talk Indianapolis Colts football. And very pleased to welcome back once again, straight from Indianapolis, Indiana, Kent Sterling. Kent, good to have you back again talking Indianapolis football on the Our-Lads Football Network.
My pleasure. We're ready to go. We got camp opening up on Wednesday. Ballard's going to talk to the media tomorrow. We're all set.
Yes, absolutely. It's going to be a lot of fun. It always is every year. And again, it's not only going to be fun talking Colts football. We'll have the opportunity, hopefully sometime soon. I know camp is going to be busy, but we'll at some point get you on our OFN Insider Show. Can't wait for that. It's going to be a lot of fun this season. And Kent, before we get going, just want to remind everybody, in case they have never seen this show with you on it, and they're a Colts fan, you have a YouTube channel. Is that where you really want to direct them more than anywhere? Besides, of course, Twitter. We have that on the ticker, but you've got the YouTube channel.
Pretty much, yeah. At Kent Sterling on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. It's Kent Sterling. All Kent Sterling all the time. That's
there you go. That makes it simple. Okay. Let's get into this camp talk. And of course, everybody's going to talk about, as well they should, the quarterback position. Last time you were on the show, you talked about the draft, the picks, and of course, you and the quarterback spot and who would be the number one quarterback for week one. You were pretty adamant that it was going to be Anthony Richardson. I was surprised about that, as you know. I think it's going to, as I said before, I think Steichen is going to work wonders if he can get Richardson ready for week one. And I think that'd be a great thing if he was. Have you changed your mind at all? Or do you still 100% believe it's going to be Richardson? Or maybe that percentage has gone down a little bit?
I have not changed my mind at all. And more importantly, Jim Irsay hasn't changed his mind. Last week, he came out with Pat McAfee and said, look, it's Shane Steichen's decision. But I believe that this guy can only improve by playing. So, Shane Steichen's going to have to make a pretty good case, I think, to get Jim Irsay off that point.
I get it. And, we'll see the preseason. I think that's going to tell us a little bit for sure. Yeah. Of course, we don't care about the scores, but we'll find out exactly. And when do you already have a date for their first what do they have, a scrimmage set up already with another team?
They've got joint practices with the Bears just prior to the Bears game on the 19th.
Got it.
I think it's the 19th. They practice against each other on the 16th and 17th. Prior to that, they're in Buffalo for the preseason opener.
Okay, so actually, it just shows you there's still we're like almost a month away.
Yeah,
we can get to that.
Yeah, so, pretty close.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's break down, more than anything, I wanted to have you on to talk about camp battles and things of that nature. And I tell you what, I really want to start off with the defense, because the more I look at this defense, the more questions I see. And especially in that secondary, I don't think anything's going to happen. You tell me if anything's going to happen to Rodney Thomas based on, I shouldn't joke about it. I mean, bald eagles, they represent the country, and I know all that and how important it is, and you don't want to be killing those. But what is the situation with Rodney Thomas right now?
Oh, I think he's fine. I don't think the sins of his father are going to be visited upon him. He's healthy. They drafted another safety, Scott, out of Cal, and he's not healthy. He's on IR. So he is out of the equation. But you've got Julian Blackman, you've got Nick Cross. And out of those three, I think you're going to wind up with the two starting safeties. They really like Cross.
Yes.
Like Chris Ballard last year was like, we can't believe he was still on the board. And then you figured out maybe why he was still on the board, and he didn't play about the last 13 games of the season. But I think they've got him coached up. Ron Milas, Mike Mitchell are the secondary coaches. And Mike Mitchell is a really good young coach. He's going to get the safeties to a point where I think they can contribute. I think Blackman's going to be the opening day safety at that box safety position within Gus Bradley's scheme. But is it going to be Thomas? Is it going to be Cross? That's one of those big battles.
Do they play, as far as their base, do they play more three safeties compared to three linebackers?
No, they'll play two safeties, two linebackers, and they'll play nickel.
Okay.
So they'll have Kenny Moore as a slot corner, 2 outside corners, a box safety, and then a single high.
Okay. And let's also talk about that corner situation, because that's really where I think most of the questions are coming from.
Yeah.
Brent's I'm assuming they want him to start. He has to start. I mean, that is big, isn't it? Based on what I'm looking at on the depth chart at our lads, and also, of course, you look at the other spot and Dallas Flowers. I mean, he does not have a lot of experience,
No.
but is he penciled in right now as the starter?
I don't know whether it's going to be Flowers, Rush, or Jones. They really like Jalen Jones. Jalen Jones, the 7th-round pick, they like him. And Gus Bradley likes those big, tall, rangy guys. Brent is a big, tall, rangy guy. Rush is big, tall, rangy, and fast. Brent's we haven't seen at all during mandatory minicamp, rookie minicamp.
Really?
He hadn't played. He's had a wrist thing going.
Okay.
And so that's one of the guys on Wednesday where we're going to look and see where number 29 is. Number 29 is one of those guys on the roster that's circled. We're going to make sure he's on the field. You look for Rush, you look for Jones, you look for Flowers. You assume that the starting 2 outside corners are going to come from that group of guys.
Okay, yeah, definitely. And that just, look, no matter what happens, that means there's going to be a ton of inexperience in the secondary. Even guys that are not rookies, they're going to be, 1 year of experience, that kind of thing. Blackman, Kenny Moore, especially Moore, I guess, the statesman of the group. But overall, do you think that this is set? They're not going to look to bring in any other veterans before the season begins? What's your guess?
He doesn't do that very often.
Okay.
That's not the way Chris Ballard operates. You could go get a guy like Marcus Peters and kind of plug and play and hope. But he tends to throw his chips behind his guys.
Okay.
And if he drafted him for a reason, and he's going to roll with those guys. And what you wind up with as a result of that, I think, is a mediocre top of the roster, which is problematic and has been problematic. And if you want to look at maybe a root cause of 45, 51, and 2, and 1 since he started, that's one of them. They're just at the top end of the roster. They're just not very good. At the bottom end of the roster, they're really good. From player like 40 to 53, that's a good roster, but that's not how you win games in the NFL.
Yeah, and that will at least give us a lot to look at during camp, because that's where, and that means there's going to be a lot of battles for those final roster spots as well. Is there a player in that secondary, since there are a lot of young guys and we've got the draft picks and we know some of the guys, and Flowers is going to be a big mystery, but anybody else there that we should be keeping an eye on that you might have noticed during OTAs?
I think Cross is going to be a really
Cross.
He's going to be a guy who either shows out or
put up or shut up time.
Yeah, they had a guy, Marvell Tell, that they thought when they took him, he was going to be that kind of guy that they could kind of play at corner, they could play at safety, who's going to be a playmaker on the back end, and he just didn't work out that way. Cross is very similar in that way, in that they need somebody on the back end to make plays. First guy that Chris Ballard drafted for the Colts was Malik Hooker, and they were hoping that with Hooker, they kind of had that anchor point in that secondary, and I think that they're hoping somehow, some way, Cross becomes that.
Okay.
I think this is a huge camp for him.
All right, and then Leonard, what's the status of his health? That is huge, of course.
All we've seen and all we've heard, we heard from Shaquille, and he said he's got no timeline. Then we saw an Instagram video that he posted last week, and he looked pretty explosive, at least compared to the way he looked when he played last year. Last year when he played, he looked slow. He looked old. He did not look dynamic in any way, shape, or form. Despite that, he came up with an interception, I think, because nobody thought he was going to be in that position being that slow. Oh. It worked out for him in that limited instance. But the Instagram video was really, I think, he wouldn't have posted it if he didn't feel good about things. Okay. There would be no reason to do it. So, maybe you're a little bit optimistic about it. Jim Irsay, when he was talking with Pat McAfee, he did not sound optimistic. And so I think, expectations are low. But if he comes through, That would be a wonderful surprise. We'll see tomorrow or Wednesday if he opens camp on the PUP list or not. And that's not a damning factor in whether he's going to be available. It's just going to be interesting to keep our eye on.
And that is going to be a big deal, though, for this defense, isn't it? Because if something happens where he has a setback or doesn't play like the old Shaq Leonard, then it's going to really be a trickle-down effect to the rest of the defense. Because, again, as you just mentioned, it's not like there's a lot of star power right now. A couple of guys, obviously, we'll get to, but Leonard is like the man, and that would be a big loss.
In 2021, he created alone 12 turnovers. That's a big deal.
Yep.
If you got a guy who can create 12 turnovers, that's like 3/4 of a turnover a game almost. Yeah. If you got that guy on the field, you got a chance to win some games that you would otherwise lose. And the Colts, if they're going to win games this year, they're going to win them close. They're not going to go out and beat people 45-22 often, I don't think. So you need a turnover here, a made kick there. You need something to happen that puts you in a good situation that you otherwise wouldn't be in. If you got to ride with E.J. Speed and Zaire Franklin at linebacker, you feel not too badly about. I think E.J. Speed's going to be an upgrade over Bobby Okereke, who signed a free agent deal with the Giants.
Oh.
But if you don't have Leonard on the field, that defense becomes very ordinary.
And then up front, and this is really where the Colts are going to have to make their due, especially anytime you're running a four-man front defense like they have. It's time for Kwity Paye to take the next step, isn't it? I mean, this is it. It's either it happens now or you're not even sure if he's going to be on the team in a couple of years.
That's absolutely the key. And Kwity kind of – here's what they do too, is they don't want just a guy who can get after the passer. And you see that because Yannick Ngakoue is gone. And that he was a one-trick pony. He's going to get his 8 to 12 sacks a season. He did that for the Colts, but it wasn't enough. You've also got to be able to stop the run if you're going to play for Gus Bradley and maybe more importantly, Chris Ballard. Kwity Paye can do that. And then on the other side, you got Ibukam and Odangbo, and somehow, some way, you hope to cobble together some sacks while defending the run well. It's kind of like Chris Ballard gravitates toward people who are jacks of all trades and masters of none. And again, that leads to the mediocrity of the roster, I think.
Yeah, you mentioned Dangbo. He had the injury early, but this is also a big year. Matter of fact, Paye and Dangbo coming out the same draft class, first and second rounders. So both of them really need to step up for this defense. A couple of draft picks along the defensive line, including the fourth rounder. And we talked, does he have a nickname yet?
Tommy.
All right,
everybody calls him Tommy. Nobody knows what else to do with that name.
And, of course, Dave Syverson, we mentioned this on the draft show, our lead draft scout at our lads, was really high on Tommy as a sleeper and to get him in the fourth round. So that's going to be also a big look at during camp. It's going to see how he looks. And also Titus Leo was taken in round 6. Anybody else we should keep an eye on there on the defensive line?
Tyquan Lewis, I want to see what he looks like coming off that injury. Same exact injury, and I think it was in the same week, but it was to the opposite leg. And he is a really good dude and a hardworking guy. And every time he just kind of gets to peek over the top of his potential, he has these catastrophic injuries. And you hope that Lewis is going to be able to come back and is going to be able to play at a high level because he's a good depth piece on the line. And they just last week, they re-signed Al-Qadim Muhammad, who went to the Bears last year with Eberflus, but he's coming back on a one-year deal here. The year that he did really, really well with the Colts, he had 7 sacks. So he's a guy who can kind of come in and be a third down guy. And so I know they're happy to have him back. We'll see what that does for the overall depth of the D-line.
Is Eric Johnson, does he have room to grow as a fifth rounder last year? FCS experience, give him a year, that's supposed to happen. But are you expecting anything from Eric Johnson this year?
He was kind of long in the tooth, right? When they drafted him, I think he was 24. And so you figured that he's going to be closer to his potential than a 21-year-old that they might take. They're kind of set at defensive tackle, and I think Grover Stewart's going to make a really good case this year to stay on the field on third down and go get some sacks.
Okay.
This is an option year for him. The last year he's under contract with the Colts, and he needs to put up some numbers to be able to go get paid. And I think that that's going to be, not that they're all motivated by money, But I think Grover is kind of like, hey, let me be on the field enough to go get 10 sacks, and I'll get them for you.
Is there a breakout player on defense before we slide over to offense that you think could be a rookie, but somebody that you think nobody's really paying any attention to that could have an impact some way or another this season?
Maybe Tommy, out Northwestern, and if you watched his tape, he's very fast. And that's what the Colts did in the draft. They went out and got speed, minus Juju Brents, who's like a 4.53 guy in the 40, but long and tall anyway. Tommy is a real fast guy, high motor guy. I think he's going to be able to get on the field early because of that high motor, and he's going to be able to go make a few plays that maybe other guys wouldn't.
All right, let's switch over to offense. And for the viewers, you can see I'm doing that on the Ourlads depth chart. And we talked about quarterback. So that's all three guys. That's set. Nothing's going to happen there. It's just a matter of who's starting. But at running back, what's the deal there? Because Jonathan Taylor, we know how good he is, but are they going to what's their game plan? And we know we've talked about it, how important it's going to be when Richardson's out there to have both of those guys cause havoc in the ground game and make things very interesting. But overall, are they trying to lessen Taylor's workload or the exact opposite, try to hammer him away like they did in 2021?
I don't think it'd be a great look. Like not signing him to an extension, because they're going to do with him what the Giants did with Barkley and the Raiders did with Jacobs. They're going to franchise him at just over $10 million a year. It would be stupid not to do that. But if you run him to empty, if he gets 400 touches, that's not going to be a good look. That's going to leave a mark. And the guys on the Colts, they love Jonathan Taylor. I don't think they're necessarily campaigning for Jonathan Taylor to get paid a whole bunch of money, because that might take money out of their pockets. But if the Colts run him into the ground, I think that's going to leave a stain on management for the Colts that is really, especially if the Colts are what they seem to be, which is kind of a 6-win team. If you're in week 15 and let's say you're 5-9, 5-8, something like that, and you run him 30 times and throw him under 10 balls, people are going to be really hot. People are not going to like that at all. So I think that they're going to try to take their foot off the gas a little bit, find some touches for Evan Hull. I think Evan Hull, every time I've watched him, minicamp or rookie minicamp, watched the running backs work, my eyes go straight to 26.
Okay.
Because Taylor's not out there. You look at Evan Hull and you think, hey, who's that guy? I'd look him up like twice, 3 times. I was like, oh, that's Evan Hull. He's kind of a guy who flashes a little bit, so I think they're going to find a way to get him some touches.
So you think it's really going to be Moss and Hull are going to get the brunt of the work as far as the number 2 role on the team?
Yeah, and I think Hull's going to be a guy who is kind of dynamic in the passing game in a way that you know what? Taylor's a pretty good – he's not a bad receiver out of the backfield. They just don't use him that way. Maybe that'll change with Steichen. With Reich being gone, they won't throw as many kind of bubble screens as they did last year to the wideouts, and you open it up a little bit more. Everybody – like last year at this time, Frank Reich was saying, you watch what we do with Nyheim Hines. Nyheim Hines is going to have a breakout year. And he had said that before. It just never happened. They never found a way to do it. I think that Steichen's going to be a little bit different, and I think they're going to find a way to get him the ball out of the backfield. And then I think, Moss tends to be kind of that bowling ball guy who can go get you 2 when you need 1.
Okay. And then you think Hull is going to take reps away from Jackson regarding the passing game?
Yeah, I think that he's going to wind up being a guy who gets the ball a little bit.
Yeah.
And if he gets 10 touches a game, I wouldn't be surprised by that.
Okay. Now the tight ends, there's a bunch of them. So is anyone going to get traded?
They don't tend to do that very much. And when they do make a trade, like they traded Stephon Gilmore to the Cowboys for a 5th rounder. And some people are saying, well, it was to clear salary space. Well, they got cap space up the yin-yang.
Yeah.
They still have $25 million. So I don't think the 9 that was due Gilmore was really a deal. I think they're going to see how it shakes out. They got 7 guys. And I'm not sure who among the 7 are going to be like the 3. So this is a really weird room, and that's going to be a position of huge interest. See, like Kyle Granson is a guy who can catch it and run with it, but he's a guy who hadn't shown an ability to block. And I think what they choose to do with the offensive line is going to be kind of a factor in who they choose to keep as a tight end. Jelani Woods, I think, can block people a little bit. Mo Ali Cox can block people a little bit. Both those guys really tall, really rangy, and can get their hands on defensive linemen and keep a quarterback healthy. I think I'm getting ahead of myself, and I'm getting ahead of you, so I apologize.
That's okay.
But Braden Smith is a guy at right tackle that they may choose to move inside to right guard over the top of Will Fries and install Blake Freeland in as the right tackle.
Okay.
That's the long-term mission.
Okay.
And if Freeland can show that, he can anchor and keep a guy out, do it with his strength. He's really athletic and he can move really well. If they put Freeland at right tackle, they're going to need a tight end next to him that can block a little bit.
Okay.
If they go with Braden Smith as that right tackle and plug and play like Emil Ekiyor, who's an undrafted free agent, or Will Fries is back as a starter, and Braden is setting that edge, that's a different thing. That's a different calculus with who they keep at tight end.
But it also gives them options even during the game to make those, which is always a good thing. Okay, so then, well, who do you think has the most value if they were going to trade one of those tight ends?
Maybe Granson, because I think he's the most dynamic. He's the guy who can get out into space, make catches, make plays.
Okay.
And he looked pretty good at minicamp. He looked explosive. And, I don't know how much you can really invest in this, but when you listen to him, there's a cockiness to him this year that has not been there in years past. He was always kind of a deferential guy with the media. This year, he walked up to the podium and it was his room.
Okay.
So I wonder if that's got something to do with either showing us how much he's being invested in, or just, hey, I'm the guy, I'm taking it. I wonder which that is, but Kylan Granson's a guy to watch.
And then, of course, Mallory, the rookie. So he was drafted, which kind of surprised people with the depth of the room. But maybe there's got to be a reason. Maybe we'll find that out during camp before the season begins. And then I think you also mentioned the kid Ogletree, the D2 kid, during our last conversation. So he's also going to be in the mix, correct?
And he looked fantastic at camp last year until he got hurt. He looked he looked like the guy. He looked like a guy you would take based upon his level of work during camp that you would take over the top of Jelani Woods. And you mentioned Mallory, and I think Mallory just embodies a lot of the traits that Jack Doyle brought to the roster before he retired.
Okay.
I think they see some Jack Doyle in Will Mallory, and I think they miss Jack Doyle. So Will Mallory's kind of that guy for them, if that makes sense.
It does. And that's why you got to think one of these guys is they're going to try. You would think that they would try to trade him, but you never know, because you're not going to get much for any of these guys anyway.
You wouldn't think.
It's not that big of a deal. All right, so offensive line, and pretty much what you described is really the only wrinkle, correct? Otherwise, everything's the same guys from last year are going to be thrown in there. And it's just a matter of just being better. It's a new system, new coach, another year, get it. But this is just a lot of the same guys, with the exception, of course, as you mentioned, of Freeland coming in, and maybe even the kid from Alabama that we talked about and you just mentioned, who could be an interesting watch during camp.
Yeah, Bernard Ryman is a guy who didn't play very well his first 6 or 7 games. And then I thought he really got set and really kind of figured it out, and the game sort of slowed down for him. He's a very smart guy. He's added 15 pounds. I think he's going to elevate his game to where he's a high-level left tackle in the NFL, maybe a top 7 guy. Certainly, I think in the top quartile.
Okay.
And then if Quentin Nelson can come back healthy, if Ryan Kelly, I think Ryan Kelly, because they lost he and his wife during that Hard Knocks season in 2021, they lost their child. I think that was really difficult for him and his family. Obviously, it would be. and I think that affected his level of play last year. I think that puts him in a different mindset. That right guard position, they got to fix.
Yeah.
Either Will Fries has to fix that internally on his own, or they got to go with Ekior, or they got to slide Braden Smith. I've always felt like Chris Ballard, he drafted Braden Smith as a guard, and through that first camp in 18, he looks like a tackle. You watch him move, you watch him walk, you're like, that's a tackle. What are you doing? And so we would ask him, and we'd say, are you sure that he's a guard? And Ballard would start to get steamed and say, yes, we drafted him as a guard. He is going to be a guard. And then all of a sudden, a couple of days in, they flip him to tackle. I think Ballard has always had that hope to have Nelson and Smith be bookend guards.
Interesting.
And fill that right tackle somehow, some way. And I think Freeland might be that guy.
Well, I mean, when you don't, and that was the big, we talked about it at with all the picks that the team had, and the 12 in our recap show, that they didn't draft a guard. How could they not do that? Maybe this is their reason. So,
when you start to, some guys say, we trust our board, and I think, okay, you're full of crap. We know that you're going to draft where you got holes. Chris Ballard, he goes with the board. What the board tells him to do, he does. He's going to draft the best player available, and that's kind of what he did. And three of those guys being quarterbacks, I don't think he foresaw Isaiah Rodgers and that issue, but I think it's a damn good thing that he went out and got three of these guys because they're going to need all of them.
Yeah, we didn't even mention that, but we did the other show. Okay, so wide receiver. That'll wrap it up. And McKenzie, Downs inside now in the slot, but Downs is going to be the guy, right? That's the guy that they really are counting on.
I think so. I think it's Downs, and then McKenzie is kind of a guy. If they couldn't get Downs, they've got McKenzie as the free agent. I think that's kind of the way that worked. And then Pierce as an outside guy, you really need to see Alec Pierce take a step north.
Yes.
He drafted 53rd. He's got to become a guy, especially with somebody who can now throw him the ball. That's important. Matt Ryan was rag-armed last year. And Anthony Richardson, I don't know to what level he's going to be able to read a defense, but he does not have a rag arm.
No.
He can throw the ball as far, as hard, and spin it as well as anybody I've ever seen. And so I don't think that Alec Pierce is going to lack for opportunities.
Okay, so no, but there's questions after those top four because, or are there a couple of players that you feel are more locks that we don't think about outside of Indianapolis? Because it just looks like to me there's only four locks. Am I wrong?
No, I think it's exactly right. And people during camp, they're going to watch this guy Mike Strawn, and this is his third camp, I think, and. Yeah, Strawn always looks great in camp, but he can't do anything during games because I don't think he really understands the game and what he's got to do and how he's got to kind of, run his routes. There's something wrong. There's a reason that a 6'5" guy with great speed and good hands is not being utilized at all.
Yeah.
And at camp, he's going to look wonderful. But, yeah, that fifth spot, I have no idea who's going to wrestle that away from the other. That's going to be an interesting thing. But it always is in camp because you can't hit guys. So the receivers catching in traffic in a game and catching in traffic in camp, those are two very, very different things.
Well, McKenzie, he's also going to return kicks, so that'll be valuable. Is that also this? By the way, is Flowers? Arlets has him penciled in as the number one kick returner. Is that the case?
He is a really good returner, but I think it depends on the development of the rookie cornerbacks. If you have to use Flowers and you really don't have anybody behind him, you got to play him at corner and have somebody else return kicks, or just put your hand in the air and take it at the 20 or 25.
And Downs can do that a little bit, can he?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, he can. He's not got breakaway speed. He was really productive at North Carolina. I mean, crazy productive. In a way where I was really surprised he slipped to the third round. That guy, I think, based upon his last 2 years at North Carolina, showed a pedigree that should have elicited some kind of interest in the second round. I was really surprised.
And so is there another? So as far as receiver, that's going to be a big watch during camp. Is there somebody to watch? Is there somebody you're intrigued with regarding any of those names? Because there's a lot of, I can see 8 guys there on the depth chart when you get past guys we've seen before, including Doolin. Perryman is maybe a guy.
Doolin's a guy who can do some things. I think that's a pretty good bet at 5. I had to check your guide, for goodness sake. I had to take a look and because I don't know who Johnny King and Juwan Winfrey or Cody Case are.
Yeah.
So I don't think they didn't catch my eye during any of the camp festivities. And so we'll see on Wednesday if somebody pops. But I really think it's those top 4. And then you've got a pretty significant decline.
And this kid Vincent Smith came from what, Division 3, I guess, or Division 2? I don't know where it's, but he.
Ballard loves to show everybody how hard that staff works. You know what I mean? You got D3 guys, you got guys from everywhere. You look at and God bless Grover Stewart from Albany State. I didn't even know, and I know Albany, Georgia. I've got family in Albany, Georgia, and I had no idea that there was an Albany State University or if they had a football program before Grover.
And then also, Vince, and then you also have Malik Turner from Illinois to keep an eye on. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. Somebody's going to make it, or who knows? They could pick up. That could be a definite pickup late in training camp.
And that's what might happen at safety too. The Colts have shown a kind of an aptitude for going out and getting somebody, a guy like, and this goes back before Ballard, but a guy like Mike Adams who could come in and play a significant role at safety, or Mike Mitchell back in the day came in and kind of mentored Quincy Wilson as he also was kind of productive for the last time. They've shown an ability to go out and get veteran safeties who can still play a little bit. So maybe they'll do that.
And then lastly, offense, give me like I asked you on defense, give me like somebody who could break through this year that may not be expected outside of Indianapolis.
Yeah, Hull and Mallory would be my 2 guys. I just kind of like Hull. The way he moves is predictable. I think he does what he's supposed to do, and I think that's important for a rookie. I think he's got a mental aptitude, an intellectual aptitude for football that's going to allow him to understand the kind of the depth of the playbook and be able to go in and be productive. And I think the same is true with Mallory. Mallory's a guy who comes obviously from a football background. I mean, Bill Mallory was a head coach at Indiana for, I think, 14 years. That's his grandfather. Will, his dad, his uncle, it's the family business. And so he knows how this operates. He knows what's going to be expected of him. And I think he's got a chance to deliver it.
Yeah, and Hull, of course, not surprising. He's got the smarts. He did go to Northwestern. I'm sure he's glad he's out of there, though. So
I would think so. Not to be at Northwestern, I think.
Yeah. All right. Always great talking Colts football with you, Kent. We'll do it again before the season begins. And again, hopefully we'll get you on our Insider Show before the season begins as well. I know it's going to be busy, so enjoy. And we'll check out the YouTube channel for more Colts information between now and then.
Thanks very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Kent.